This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the OpenSpecimen webinar. We'll just give a few more minutes before we get started. So let me get started. Hi, I'm Srikanth Adiga. I'm the CEO of OpenSpecimen. Today, I'm going to talk about the eConsenting platform that we developed in the last 1 year. And apologies for confusion regarding the timing of the call due to daylight saving. There was some issues with that, but anyway, we will be doing the recording of the webinar and hosting it for people who could not make it. So we developed this module about an year back. We started with one of the initial adopters was Columbia University in New York. And then since then, Kansas University and University of Miami has adopted the same module. All of them are existing users of OpenSpecimen 2. We are also talking to a couple of others on the same. So the module itself can be either installed as a separate app or on top of OpenSpecimen, an existing OpenSpecimen instance. So why would you install it as a separate app? Is if it is not in the context of biospecimen collection. So if you want to do eConsenting independently as a database, and there is it's nothing related to biospecimens, etc., then you can you can or suppose you are not even an user of OpenSpecimen, so you just want to adopt the eConsenting module, or you can install it on top of OpenSpecimen. That is, you have an existing OpenSpecimen and you are it will share all the OpenSpecimen infrastructure. It is kind of a plugin on top of OpenSpecimen. So therefore, no need of additional infrastructures, VM servers, etc. And especially if you are doing eConsenting for your biobank projects, then it makes all the more reason to use it with OpenSpecimen. So one of the first things that I want to address, because Redcap is popularly, is used across the board, especially in American universities, and many of them use it for e-consenting. So, the most common question that we get asked is, why use OpenSpecimen's e-consenting when we could just use Redcap? So to start with, Redcap is a platform for generic data collection. It's not actually made for e-consenting or made for a specific purpose. It's just a generic, form builder kind of application. It's great at doing what it does, but it is meant for, it's not meant for any one custom purpose. It does not have the business logic needed for e-consenting. You can create a form, call it e-consent form, send it out as a survey, etc. But e-consenting is a lot more than just creating forms. For example, Redcap won't allow you to do versioning of the consent forms. If you create a version, then it is as good as an independent form. There is no link between the questions asked. So suppose there is question 1 and question 2 in the version 1, and question 3 gets added in version 2. So now when you fill a form for version 2, it's completely independent of version 1. So you won't be able to figure out that the question 1 and question 2 were the same two questions in the two versions, which is basically the second point, which is reuse of. So similarly, you can create multi-language forms in Redcap, but it is still not, it's just independent forms. So it's like any other form builder, etc. So you won't be able to reuse the consents across the versions. Similarly, if you add additional fields to the consent form, again, each one of those things are just independent fields. Reporting is something that is very powerful in OpenSpecimen, and I'll show you a few reports that you can build. And validation, for example, you cannot say don't allow to collect specimen collection unless the patient has consented for this for biobanking. If the patient says no, then specimens cannot be collected. Or you cannot say, if the patient says no, then specimens cannot be distributed to an external agency or whatever. So suppose there is a consent to say, do not use my specimens for external research or commercial research or pharma research. Now you cannot put validations in the system saying that if the patient has said no, then do not give it to outside the institute. So things like that. So all those kinds of very specific custom features that is specific to e-consenting is not available in something like Redcap, and because it's meant for generic data collection needs. Now coming to what is OpenSpecimen's e-consenting, the primary goal is that it's e-consenting, right? So electronically consent directly from the patients. So what you can do is that send emails to the patients, use tablets to mobile or tablet to collect data from the patients. We'll come to that in a bit. And along with e-consents, you can also send out, say, surveys, questionnaires. You can create a medical history form or a survey form, which is independent of the consent. So in addition to e-consent forms, suppose once the consent is filled, and if the consent is yes for participation, now you can send out the next form to record, say, medical history of the patient or family history of the patient, etc. So you can do more than consenting. You can also do additional surveys on top of the in addition to the consent forms. You can communicate with patients via emails or text messages. Now who can enter the consent data? So you got two options. So one is patients who are sitting at home, especially with COVID and wanting to implement social distancing, or reducing the need to do face-to-face meetings, etc. that's how in some sense the whole eConsenting module got developed, because of wanting to do consenting from home. So you would create consent forms in OpenSpecimen. Obviously you need the email ID of the patients, but then once you have that, you can just send out the surveys or the e-consent forms for the patients to fill from home. So they would get an email with the URL, they will click on it and finish the consenting process. So now, if you don't want to do that, or in addition to that, you can also do e-consenting with patients at the clinic. So now you can imagine that the patient is sitting. Now you want to be able to register the patient, open the e-consent form, and give the, say, a tablet, an iPad or a Android tablet or a handheld device, or even a desktop, laptop, whatever, to the patient to sit and do the data entry. So now the challenge here is that if you just let them sit at the system, they could just click here and there and go into rest of OpenSpecimen or look at rest of the patient's data, right? So when you give access to the patients to do the data entry at the clinic, we have implemented something called as patient mode data entry. So when you do that, they can just fill in the consent form or do the thing that you want them to do and do nothing else. So they get a very restricted view of the system. And obviously the clinic staff, as a normal user of OpenSpecimen, can log in and collect the data. About features, let's have a look at what the consenting model allows you to do. So the first thing is, there's a new role that is created for consent collectors. For example, now if I go into the system, so you see here, I have a new user called as, I created a new demo user called as consent collectors. Before that, let me show you the role. So now you have a role that I created called consent collector. They only have access to participants, consents, and queries. So now basically consent responses is a new privilege, where now you can give someone access only to do, suppose it's a clinic coordinator who is in charge of just doing consenting of patients. So you can give them only access to consent collection as a role. Obviously you can give more things to them, like collecting patients, collecting visits, etc. But this is just a demo role of a very restricted access to the user. So now if I log in as that user, so if you see, this is the demo consent collector here. I only see I don't see anything else in the system. I only see the projects for which e-consenting I am supposed to do consents. So suppose now I go into this project and go into any patient. You see that I don't have access to the visit information, the specimen information, and anything else. So the only thing that I see is the consent tab and the forms tab, if there are any questionnaires that I'm supposed to fill with the patient. So this is a very restricted view that you can give to some of the users if you want to do that. So the next thing is, you can create forms in multiple languages. So for example, almost all of the current clients have forms in English and Spanish, and in fact one of the clients also has in Creole. So let's see. So you see that you have a participant consent in English and the same thing in Spanish. So surrogate consent in English, the same thing in Spanish. So you can have multiple forms associated with the project, different form for assent and different form for consents and things like that. So suppose if I go now and let me add a new participant and show you this. Suppose I create a demo eConsent English participant and I select English as the preferred language. And you see a button here called proceed to consents. So now when I click on this, I directly go, this is the first question I'm asked. So am I doing it as, am I doing it for a patient? That is, if I'm a clinical coordinator, or is it the patient who is going to do it? Let me just go ahead and do it. So when I do proceed, you see it starts with with the consenting process for that patient. For example, now I can, this is a consent form that is designed for the patient. So I can do, so I can create forms like this where I say, there are multiple steps with, you can see how many steps are there here. You can go through this. Next, next, and then say, okay, I agree to participate, I agree to that you may contact me, and so I can configure. So all these fields that you see, all the consents, all these questions are configured for this study. So it can be completely different for some other study. It's up to you to design how you want to design these forms. So I sign and I save. So I can now, if there is a next survey that is assigned to this, I can do that, or else I can go back to the patient. So now if I go here, you see that so basically I agree is, kind of yes for, it's a negative one. It says decline to participate in this biobank. So it's done the other way around. So you see here that now the consent form is filled, when was it created, who created it, etc. is all available. So that, so now suppose if I go to the same one in Spanish, you see that I can create a form in Spanish with the buttons in Spanish, etc. So the multiple language support is kind of, even applies to things like buttons and things like that. So I click again, it's the same. So when I was talking about difference between Redcap and OpenSpecimen eConsenting, so now if you see here, the question here, it says in Spanish I agree, and again in Spanish I agree, whatever. But in the back end, it's actually going to the same field. So the same consent statement is mapped to both the forms. Whereas in something like Redcap, they would go into two independent forms. So now, you can't do reporting on top of it. You can't ask questions like, show me all patients who have said I agree to this consent, because you'll have to now select 4 different forms to be able to do such queries. Whereas here, even though it is being displayed as a different field, the actual consent statement mapped behind this is the same consent statement. It's the same concept code, consent code, and the same field that is being used. And that applies to everything. That applies to this name, the signature, everything remains the same. So I will not fill this form. So let me go back. So for example, if I go to one more study here, this is one more demo study that I have. So if I go in here and see the consent forms, you see now we have English, Spanish, and Creole. So Creole is another language that is used in Miami, or in and around there in a few of the countries neighboring to Miami. So you can have more than one language forms, and all of them kind of all of them map to the same set of fields. So there is no difference. So you see here it's a completely different language now, and when you go down, it has again different kinds of fields. All of them map to the same set of fields in the backend. So that's the kind of highlight of this implementation, that you can have multiple languages, multiple versions of the form, because consent forms get modified over a period of time, right? So 6 months down the line, you might add more fields, you might want to collect additional consents, etc. So now when you're doing that kind of consenting, you don't want to start with fresh form every time and collect completely different set of data, and then you are not able to kind of map all that data together. So whereas this allows you to take care of all those kinds of issues. Moving.
We have one question in chat uh, from
Okay,
Lydia.
can
It's
yeah, can
about
you just go ahead.
so the question is, I saw you did signature when you did a consent form. How did you do
Mhm.
it? So usually laptop does not allow to do it. What device? I think it's device. Did you use, please?
So
So yes,
what I
Sri.
did right now is, when I'm on laptop, I just use the mouse pad. But when typically these kinds of things I would expect you do with the tablet, with the patient, in which case you can use a stylus. You can give the tablet and the stylus to the patient. But right now when I did it, I just used the mouse pad to do it. And these are all optional fields. It is the way you design your form. Maybe you don't need the signature, maybe you need the signature. So what fields to include, some of these could be, maybe I think this is witness of the consent. All these kinds of things is up to you, how you design this form. So to answer your specific question, so I did that using the mouse pad right now. Typically, it's done with the tablet and a stylus, or a mobile phone and a stylus. I hope that answers your question. Let me go to the next slide. Consent form versioning. So let me see if this has the versions. So you see here it is, it's version 4.2, etc. So I can create versions of the consent. If you see here, there is an icon to say add revision. So when I click on add revision, I can now upload new consent configuration, and say the new consent form is 5.0, and it would come up. And then you can also archive the old consent version. So suppose now, once you upload say 4.3 or 5.0, you don't want the older version to be displayed anymore for new patients. So you can just archive those documents. You see here there is an option to archive. So that way the old data collected already in this form will remain in the system, but for the new patients you will only be using the newer versions. So you can use the archive feature for doing that. The and as I said, the application is mobile and tablet friendly. So in fact our Android tablet app allows you to do it in the app itself, which means that you can one of the features that one of our customers wanted was that the e-consenting could also happen when there is no internet. Suppose you go to a off-site location to register patients and do the consents. It should be possible to do without internet, come back. Then once you come back to the lab, or to the university or this institute, you should be able to sync your tablet, and the data should get uploaded. That is basically what is known as offline mode. So you can do that. You can design very patient friendly consent forms, like you saw here in the example. You could do things like step by step, where you do next kind of thing. Suppose I'm here and say Spanish. You see, I can do this in multiple steps, and also I can add multimedia if it is if you have things like an education video for your project. Why are you collecting this biospecimens? Why is it important to donate specimens? Things like that. If you want to include a video, you can do that. You can include images, logos, images, gifs, or any kind of multimedia you can include, just to educate or motivate the patients to do the to consent, say yes or whatever. You can export, once you do the consenting. For example, you do the consenting, now you want to give out this data as a printed version to the patient, right? So you can do that by doing a print, or even for filing it in your cabinet, you can take the print and keep it, in which case it will come with the complete data. All the results, etc., would be available for you to in the PDF. I just showed you the single form versus multiple forms. The patient mode data entry, I will not be able to show it right now for some technical reasons, but like I showed you in this case. For example, let me register a new participant. And I say Spanish this time. And when I click on proceed to consent, you see it asks me, do you want to proceed as participant? So if I use this, I'll get a view where none of the I won't see any of the OpenSpecimen features. The only thing available will be the consent form, and that's it. So nothing else. The patient will not be able to go back, and if you see here, I don't see anything else at the top, right? I don't see OpenSpecimen. I don't see the search bar. So the patient sees a very restricted view, and nothing else. So once they hand back the tablet or the laptop to the clinical coordinator, they can just click on sign in and go back into the system, log in and go back into the system to see what data they have entered, and if needed, do the witness, add their signature, and all those kinds of things. So this is important when you're handing over the device or the tablet to the patient, once they have come to the clinic. So if you do survey mode or email mode consenting, then you don't need to obviously worry about all these things, because the patients would be sitting at home and doing the consents. So let me also show you that part. So for example, so we have all the features documented here too. So okay, it's probably in surveys, yeah, email forms to patients. So you see here, the patients will get email notification. So you can set things like how often do you want to send the reminder if they don't fill in the consent. You can say things like send reminders every X number of days at 7:45, 3 times you can send the reminders and things like that. And you can see the survey results. So for example, if I am in the protocol, I think
So go back to the participant or participant list page, and from there you can access the survey invitation. Yeah, scroll down. Yeah, scroll down. Yeah, survey invitations.
so you see here, this shows all the surveys that has gone out. So for each patient, which survey was sent. For example, for this patient, the surrogate Spanish survey was sent on this date, and the status is still pending. Whereas in this case, the patient has already completed. So you can do things like by status. So how many have completed the consents, how many are pending. You can also do very advanced things. For example, how many people even opened the email. So for example, some people might have just not even got the email, right? So it might have gone to their spam folder and things like that. So you can also check things like how many have not even opened the email, versus how many opened the email, clicked on the survey, and then kind of didn't follow through. So there is because maybe they found the consent form very confusing. They started the consent, filling the consent form and then abandoned. So you can also look for those kinds of patients, because you want to call them up and ask, was there any problem with filling the surveys and things like that. So you can also look into those kinds of things. And how many consents expired, there are none here, but you can do all these kinds of advanced things in the survey module. So you can look for different kinds of status, and so those those are some of the things that you can do with the survey. And I will not go into things like how to configure these surveys as of now. So the key thing here is that you can configure all these surveys, and the configuration, just to show you a bit of it. The configuration is part of the the settings. Oops. Is part of the settings here inside the collection protocol. When you go into the collection protocol, you will see an option called surveys, and you can create multiple surveys and different kinds of surveys for the patient. And these surveys can also be for not just for consent forms. These can be also be for normal forms. So suppose you create a questionnaire or a medical history form and things like that. Even those things can be sent out as surveys. So that's an option that you have with this module. Now going back, yeah, so the with the standard OpenSpecimen, you can do validation based on in the distribution protocol. But with the eConsent module, you can also do validations based on you can define advanced validation rules. For example, if I go into this study, let me just open the, so in the consent tab, you see there is a validation tab. So now you see I can say things like, if any of this is yes, so informed consent is yes, or mental health records is yes, or abuse of drug abuse is yes, only then go ahead with the specimen collection step. So only then allow someone to collect specimens for this consent. So So basically you can define rules where you say, show me allow the biobank to collect consents, collect specimens only if the patient has consented, and it can be one combination of the consents also. For example, if you see here, I can also do pretty advanced things. This is the wiki page. So now if you see here, I can say things like 4 and 5 are and or 7. So either they have consented for biobanking activities or surrogate, etc., or they have said yes to this consent. So you can also do a combination of and, or, and all those kinds of things in the validation step itself. Again, these are all valid real things that are being implemented at our customer sites uh, for validating before allowing people to collect specimens, etc. So very useful feature.
Uh,
The valid
Sorry to interrupt, Shish. We have two more questions. So one from WCM team. So is there integration with a CTMS?
These, yeah, so the integration, again, all these are API based, as standard with the rest of the OpenSpecimen system. So specific integrations can be built. There is no default integration that we have done so far for any CTMS, and not just for consent. Encore is one thing that someone in Emory had done, again not in the context of consents, but the answer for all integration is always yes, because we have the APIs, and it's pretty straightforward to develop any kinds of integrations.
Sapna Gupta. So can a participant or admin update the answers after the form is submitted?
Yes, very good question. So let me go there. So the answer is yes, and but the system tracks the whole audit trail, so you will be able to see who did what. So for example, let me go to Diego Maradona. So now if you see, this is the consent form that was filled by, suppose, the patient. So now I, as the administrator, go and if I go and make any changes, when I see the audit trail here, I'll be able to see all the edits that are done, who has updated, when, and things like that. So the answer is yes, because many times the biobank staff has to enter the witness details, and things like that. So they can do the edits, and also many times data is collected over phone. Somebody didn't understand the question properly, they answered it one way, and you call them and ask them, did you really mean this, etc. So the biobank staff can do the changes, but everything is audited, so you'll be able to see who all updated the records. Okay. Anything else, Tushar? Unfortunately, I can't do the sharing as well as see the question, so I'm dependent on you.
Yeah, that's all the questions. You can go ahead, please.
Okay. So and you guys anyway saw the signature support. I was talking about the validation rules to distribute. So distribution can OpenSpecimen already supports the distribution, so you can just continue to use that with the new module also. So if you build consents using the consent module, you can continue to use those validation rules. Signature support you already saw during the demo. There is a new control that we have added in the forms module. It is available in OpenSpecimen also, so you can use that new control in the forms module to add signature fields for signatures. Now you did all these things, you collected so much data, what next, right? So the most powerful feature as it is in OpenSpecimen is its reporting, and you can do a lot of I'll quickly show some interesting queries, so that I already saved for this demo. So for example, now you see this is a data-based, pure data, right? So I can see things like in the results, I can see the patient. Let me include the patient name. I think it went to the end, is it? Okay. So I can see which form did they use, which version of the form did they use, when was it collected, and each consent statement, what was the code of the consent statement, what was the response. I can do all this, and I can now say, okay, show me only the, say, people who have used form B of Spanish, and I can see that. Or I can say, show me people who have said yes to, or rather responded to the mental health consent. So I can now see that. I can do all these kinds of jugglery with the, reporting with the consent data. And I can also do combination of both. So I can say, okay, English form A, form B, show me, I don't know whether that is record. So yeah, so I can see all these kinds of things. So this is one set of queries. The other one is count based queries. You see here that I'm asking for a summary of across different kinds of forms, what is the status of patients filling the form, how many have completed, how many survey invitations that we have sent out has expired, how many is still pending, how many have not yet opened the survey form, all those kinds of things. I can get it as a count based report. Similarly, I can create one more query. So this is again the consent form, version, statement, how many have said yes to which kind of statement. So how many have said yes, how many have said no. And all this uses the same OpenSpecimen reporting. It's as simple as going into the reporting module. Under the participant, I'll see all the consent details. I can just use those conditions. If you are familiar with using the OpenSpecimen reporting module, it's pretty straightforward to do all the queries. But the advantage is the kind of powerful queries that you can do. You can also build dashboards, dashlets, all those kinds of things using this data. So it's all the standard advantages of using OpenSpecimen's reporting module. Now yeah, so let me see. Now those were some of the saved queries, but let us look at some of the examples of the different kinds of reports. I showed you the list of patients based on consent response. For example, I showed you that you can do consent. For example, if I go here, so this is the consent statement. So I can look for data for very specific consent statements, people who have filled in this consent, how many are there across all kinds of forms. Or I can say I want to look at only the Spanish ones, and all those kinds of things. So that is this example here. List of patients based on consent response. I showed you the consent version or the consent forms also. So you can see that list of specimens. I can, if I collected the patients, I can just extend the same query to include columns from specimens and visits, etc., etc. So it's the same query interface. So you can, as long as you have data, you can develop very interesting queries. And this is one of the most important or interesting queries. For example, if you are consenting minors, and once they turn 18, you want to reconsent them, right? So you can develop a query and say that send me a report every month as to in the next 90 days how many patients are turning 18, and so that you can prepare a list of people that whom you need to call to do the reconsenting for them, or send out survey forms to them to do the reconsenting process. So you can do all these kinds of advanced reports in the system. So just to show you once more, if I go back here, and so this is, so if I go into the edit now, and if I go into participant, I see all the consent, the document title, which is the form name, things like consent form in English, consent form in Spanish, etc. The version of the document, version 1, version 2, who created it, etc. And the statement, the individual consent statements, if you're given a code for the consent statements, what is the response, and any other fields that you have included, like who is the witness, who is the what was the time of consenting, any other additional fields that you needed, all those things are available for reporting. So that's the kind of advantage, or even a big difference between using something like Redcap versus using OpenSpecimen, the ability to do all these kinds of. So now you see here I was talking about this earlier. When you create the form, so for example, when I see the results here, I'm seeing the counts across languages, right? So for example, if I go to the other one here, so see, so when I say consent statement, I don't need to say, I'm not bothered about whether this patient entered the data using a Spanish form or using using an English form. The consent statement is the same across all the forms. So the backend code takes care of recording the same consent statement irrespective of which language form the patient used. So when you're doing reporting, you won't get multiple fields for the same consent. So it's in the backend, your all data goes against the same field, therefore making it very easy to do the reporting on top of it. Okay, so that's about most of the consent part. So one of the key questions that we get asked when talk about e-consenting is compliance. So again, like rest of OpenSpecimen, all the consent data gets audited. And if there was any change in the data, it gets audited, etc. You can also include additional signature fields if needed, so that's kind of an advantage. uh, so that's about it. So if anyone has more questions, I can take it now, or you can also unmute and ask the questions, or if you have if you want to see, say you have a consent form that you use and you want to see that being implemented in our test server or our demo server, we'll be happy to take your consent form and show you exactly how the consent form will look like, how will the emails look like, etc. if you want. So I'll be happy to take any questions, or you can email it to me. The all if you go to our wiki page, the help manual, you'll see a module for eConsents. So it again has all the documentation for each step, including how to configure the consents and what kind of things are allowed, not allowed, and all those things. You are happy, this is open for everyone. You can go and have a look at them. How to create queries using eConsent, all these things are available here. Yeah, so that's that's about it. Any questions, or
Actually,
there
we
are
have a
more?
couple. Uh,
Yeah, I'm seeing the question. So let me take the questions from bottom up. As I understand, OpenSpecimen is connected to the email. Yeah, so if you want to do email based consenting, that is, if you want patients to do consenting, enter the consent data, then you need to record the email ID of the patient, and as well as they should be yeah, so that is something that you will need to record for the patient. So because you want to send them emails, right? So there is no option there. One of the feature that that we are not yet implemented but is pretty easy to do and we can do is also to send reminders via text messages, that is SMS. So no one has asked for it so far, but apparently that is something that some people do, and if there is a need for it, that can also be done. But obviously in that case you would also record the telephone number. So we don't do it, but if it is needed, it can be done. Julie is asking about 21 CFR part 11. So that is something that by default all the requirements that are needed for the compliance in terms of, from the software point of view, in terms of security, in terms of audit, all those standard things are all part of the system, and that is the same thing that applies for OpenSpecimen also. The and we none of the existing customers have gone through a compliance like that, but if someone has to go through go through that, it is something that we can easily support. There is a lot more documentation that we need to produce when you go through something like that. So the system is geared for doing that. The system supports all the things that you need. Just that when you do, because all this compliance is not for the software, it's for the implementation, right? So suppose if we implement it at WCMC, then that specific implementation has to be compliant. So those kinds of things we can easily support if and when needed. How does this support longitudinal survey models where a study I see is collected year 1, consent in year 3 of the study? Yeah, so the maybe we need to get into a bit more detail of that, but when you do the year 3 consents, you can again create one more survey for year 3 and send it out to patients. If at the initial stages in a year 1 you had one survey that you had to collect, that is you have to collect, suppose, consents at every time point. You just need to create additional surveys that applies to each time point and attach the right consent form. So if it is the same consent form or if it is an updated consent form, you just have to create those many surveys. So that is something that when at each time point you can create and send it to them. Can a participant or admin update answers? Yeah, I think we already answered that. Okay, any more questions? Looks like that's it. So we will be sharing the recording. We will be putting it on YouTube and sharing the URL. Anyone will be able to access the video. So please feel free to share it with others, and or if you have any questions, you can always email me for a customized demo for your center, and we'll be happy to set it up for you guys. Thanks everyone, and again sorry for confusion regarding the time of the webinar. Unfortunately we Indians are not used to daylight saving time, and there was some confusion due to that. So sorry about that, and look forward to talk to you again in the next webinar. Thanks. Bye bye.